Welcome to Friday night's video in our Master Series. I do believe that this is the 49th video in our Master Series and the 19th video in our first phase processing and the 8th video in our effects step. So basically what we're going to talk about, in the last video we talked about the chorus effect. I hope you enjoyed that, and that will come into play in this video a little bit. We are going to talk about delay a little bit. Now, you'll have to understand, I'll get this out of the way right now, because normally for me, what people normally look at as delay, I use in the creative process. I mean, I've got all kinds of delay plugins, different plugins that'll do different types of delays. I mean, even though I've got a groove delay here that I can sit there and I can put it on, I can take this and put one beat on the thing, and it creates this really wild rhythm. Stuff going on all over the place. That's really cool, but most of the time that is part of the creative process. Let's say I have a guitar part that I'm just going chucka 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 chucka, and I want, it's got a little bit of chorus and flange or something on it, but I want to do this really cool delay thing going on with it, pinging back and forth and cross delays and panning delays, and echoing off and all kinds of stuff to where it's just, and it's part of the actual rhythm and part of the creative process. So we're not going to really get into that, because for the most part that you've probably dealt with that when you were in the creative process and it became part of your recording process. And right now that we're in processing of stuff that's you've already done with the creative process, you're already done with the recording of that stuff, and we're going on to processing the channels to make them sound as good as possible. But that is an option. Sometimes you might get there and you might get to, you've got a production and you've talked about this to the guys and whoever you're recording for yourself, and you've got a word somewhere and you want delay on it. You just want to put delay on it, have it fade off or something, or repeating or doing something, or repeating off to one side or something like that, and there's an application for that, but a lot of times that's in the creative process. What I normally use delay for is a couple different things. The first thing I use delay for, you got an understanding of that when we talked about delay, when we were talking about choruses, chorus effect and choir effects and things like that. Then I want to delay one channel from the other to make it sound wider. A delay under the Haas effect that, or in the Haas effect, within those parameters of the Haas effect, can make things sound fatter and wider. They just can't. So, I've got it on another track. Sometimes you can have you've got a bass player and a drummer, and if you make them too static to where they're hitting exactly at the same time, that it doesn't sound natural. So you might want to put delay on one track from another. You'll have tracks, we'll talk about that in spatialization, but sometimes I'll have tracks that I want to delay them or speed from other tracks. That way it sounds more natural. It sounds fuller. It's like the bass drummer, and the bass guy and the drummer and the guitar player's tracks all aren't hitting exactly at the same time. There's a little bit of delay between each one of them that makes the whole production sound fatter, wider, and fuller. And it's the same concept we had talked about building choir, that you have 5 violins, but each one of them are not tuned exactly the same way, and they're not hitting the same moment, which causes a fullness when you're listening to an orchestra. So it's a really simple concept that we'll get into more when we start doing bodybuilding and spatialization and stereo field. But for me, the most part, when I'm dealing with delay, I'm using delay for echo. Now, you can get echo effects and things like that, but a normal delay most of the time will do echoes themselves. There are all kinds of parameters. You get all kinds of different delays, all kinds of different parameters, all of them doing all kinds of stuff. Most of the time I use that for creative process. When I pull out a delay in this process of processing the audio, I'm normally looking for if I'm going to use it for echo. Now, this can be, I will use this when we start doing reverberation also. So sometimes this might get put off until it's part of your reverberation processing. But sometimes not, because you don't want everything having an echo effect. It's one instrument. So most of the time what I'll do on just an echo effect, for the most part, that you're looking for either it to repeat so many beats or have the have the delayed hit happen after so many beats or at so many beats. You want that either synced or at a certain milliseconds, and then you're going to have feedback on it that's going to cause an echo effect and a certain amount of mix, because if you put it in the mix all the way up, all you're going to hear is that delayed hit. But if you put it at 50%, you're going to hear the initial hit and the delayed hit. So, with that going on, you've got the initial hit, you've got the delayed hit, and then you have the initial hit, the delayed hit, and then you have the two echoing hits after that it's repeating here, because I've got it looped, but it would echo out depending on how far I let the feedback go to cause the echo effect, how far it's going to trail out. So that's normally the application. Now, how I normally apply this, the understanding of this, so that you understand the concept, is, let's say you're in a canyon, right? Okay, this is an extreme example, but you want it to sound like you're in this canyon. So the first thing you're going to have is you're going to have reverberation. Huge reverberation spatialization. The bigger it is, that you actually have less. But if somewhere in the middle, like a cathedral, it's closed in, so you get this reverberation effect with a lot of echo. In a huge place, you might just get echo and not a whole lot of reverberation effect coming back at you. So basically, most of the time, what you want to do, you want to combine some of these echo effects with reverberation to cause the type of spatialization you're looking for. I'm not going to get really deep into that, because it can get really technical trying to figure out, at what point that you stop hearing reverberation and all you hear is echoing, because things aren't close enough to you to get good reverberation. It sounds almost like it's an open space, but you will get echo back. Does that make sense? Or when things are too close for you to get real good echo, or things aren't designed for you to get echo. So that can be a complicated subject. But most of the time, how I deal with that is I will go to like my mixer. Now, I'll get into my mixer and I will run some FX buses, some sends to some FX buses. And let's say I've got my delay on here. What I'm going to have this set up at so many beats or so many milliseconds, and I'm going to have a feedback coming out on it. Does that make sense? And I'm going to turn it up 100%, because all I want is that I want my initial hit from my track, and then I want this echo effect that my initial track goes bam, and the echoing effect on the next track is actually turned down a little bit, so that first delayed hit is a little bit quieter than the first one, and then the echoed hits after it are descending in decibel value. So that's a very simple concept, and running it off there is great. And then sometimes what I'll do is, on some other FX buses that I have that track sent to, is I'll do like one track will have a ping pong effect where it'll be pinging around somewhere at different velocities or at different intervals, bang, 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 or something like that, delaying off. That's just a real simple example. And, and on another one, I might do the same kind of thing, but not ping factor, and doing cross delays on it. Does that make sense? And bringing that in there at different levels. Now, the understanding of it, there's lots of different parameters and lots of different delay effects that actually can be inherent in echo. But normally, echo is a direct that you've got an echo, bam, coming at you, and sometimes you have panning effects where it's echoing off different sides, and some kind of cross delay echo effects that are actually incorporated into the entire echo that's coming back at you. So you taking that initial track that you have and sending that to FX buses, that you've got that initial hit, then you're sitting here, you got these turned off, you'll turn these two off that are doing these other things, and you'll start bringing that echo effect into there as much as you want it, and you just got to remember that it's going to be sitting in a mix. So you may adjust it later, you're like, well, it sounds great by itself now, but when I get it in the mix, it might get drowned out. I might have to turn it up a little bit or down a little bit or whatever, and get it to where it sounds about good. Then turn the other ones on and start bringing them into it. You got this one that's just like this pinging effect where it's bouncing around. It's like, well, yeah, coming off, different sides, and panning effects of the panning delays, and bringing that up into a little bit. Yeah, that's mixed in real good. And then these cross delays coming in a little bit. And pretty soon, you get it set pretty well, so by the time you get in the mix, if you have to adjust it, you just highlight them all together and adjust them together like that. or use a VCA, route them to a VCA fader, to where that you can control them all with one fader once they're set about where you want them. So I know that that's a real quick example of using that, and it may not seem, you know, a whole lot of insight into delay to you, but normally when I get into the effects processing like we are at this phase, that I'm normally using delay as most of the time some type of echo effect, because I'm going to want this echo effect happening, and on top of it I'm going to be adding certain type of reverberation to it that is going to convolve together into an effect of having this spatialization, because just the echo effect itself like that is pretty clean. There is not a lot of reverberation going on. You just have echo effect. Does that make sense? But with reverberation added to it, you also have impulse response. It's a little bit different than echo, that adds more body to it. Does that make sense? That can make it sound farther away. That can make it sound bigger. It can make it sound like it has more depth. All kinds of things that take experimentation. We haven't got into reverberation yet in spatialization stereo field, but we will. But that's normally the application that I use delay for, unless it's in the creative process. In the creative process, I'll use delay for all kinds of things because it's great, and it can really get you going, that you just got this, you know, you're just in a funk and you're just not going, you're trying to get something happening, and messing around with different effects like delays, you know, my groove delay, or I've got a bunch of different ones, this thing called multiply, and iZotope has this DDL delay that does a whole bunch of weird stuff, that you just start fussing around parameters and stuff, and sometimes you just come up with this really cool thing that just becomes part of the creative process of creation. Does that make sense? Like fussing with synthesizers. You know, you get messing with synthesizers, and it's like, well, I turn that knob, and whoa, yeah, that's pretty cool. What can I do with that? I don't know, you know, sometimes it's funny to me, and I make a joke out of it, and I make it comical sometimes, but it's great because it really is. But when I'm using delay in the processing, I'm normally looking for some type of an echo effect, and that's normally how I deal with it like that. How exactly you set it up on yours, and how exactly that you're going to want it set up, there's lots of other parameters, but you got to be real careful that when you're fussing with echo effects like that and mixing those things together, they don't cause a muddy mess, because echo and reverberation can very quickly turn a production into a really muddy mess. So a lot of times that is something that's reserved for like a note, like, you know, you've got some note that's going to hit, you know, at a break or something like that, or you've got something going on, you know, you have to really keep that in mind, because if you throw that stuff into a mix that's in progress, you know, and the song, the whole complement of instruments is playing along, and you start adding that kind of stuff into things, that it can start making it sound really muddy, messy, and just dirty, and unconnected, and messy, basically, so that nothing sounds clear, you know. But without the reverberation, echoing things and using that kind of stuff for echo effect can have a really kind of cool, almost reverberation effect, like it gets the listener thinking it's a reverberation effect, but there's no muddiness of the actual reverberation, because I look at echoes, and what we're talking about here using delays is much cleaner. Whereas convolution, reverb, and impulse responses are much dirtier. Way more impulse responses coming back at the listener, and much more, you know, things coming back at the ear that can cause muddiness. It's like the difference between when we talked about using noise, like white noise, and it's so thick across the spectrum, as comparison to saturation that's a lot thinner. So it's the same kind of concept, that it's a little bit cleaner. So I hope you enjoyed this one on using delays to get some echo effect to cause some type of an effect for your production, and I'll see you in the next video.